And these pictures here, I just want to point out the pictures I'll be sharing throughout this presentation are from participants in this study who have shared their pictures with me as they've talked about their perspectives and their experiences in the borderlands. And they've given me permission to share their photos in presentations such as these or in other written publications from this research. And as a tourism researcher, my whole question is, can tourism and ecological restoration be part of the solution to these many challenges that we have at the U.S. Mexico border? Let me advance my slide. So what we still need to know is more about these interactions, these linkages between tourism and ecological restoration. I'm sure some of you are practitioners of restoration and very familiar, but I'll share some examples on the next slide. And then research is especially lacking in a cross-border context. How will these interactions and this relationship of tourism and ecological restoration be impacted by the border, or how will this relationship impact the border? Something that we still need to know. Now, the overall purpose was to identify opportunities, challenges, and these linkages between tourism and ecological restoration. And here are some more pictures showing just the contrast, the razor wire, the steel bollards, no trespassing signs, the borderline, or the beautiful scenery, the bird life and such, that's showing this major contrast in this region. Now, to show some more context of ecological restoration, this is referring to restoring damaged ecosystems or ecological processes, and typically it's damaged or destroyed by humans. And that might be replanting a forest that has been clear cut, or reintroducing wildlife that have been hunted off, or restoring the flow of water in a river that has been dewatered through human consumption. And many see restoration as necessary to reverse the impacts of climate change and human impacts on the planet. Pictured here is I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with this whole story, but the Colorado River Delta that was dry for many decades, the water being used upstream by Phoenix, Los Angeles, agriculture, but a binational agreement in the last decade has allowed some of the flow of water to return, restoring an important ecosystem. So this whole concept of ecological restoration is so important because there's only so much that you can set aside that's still undeveloped when so much of this world has been developed. So we need to restore places. Now, tourism, on the other hand, I'll try to summarize briefly, but this is a lot of what I've been dealing with in publishing. But there's a lot of research talking about the life cycle, the development process of tourism. This curve here shows this life cycle beginning at the exploration phase when people are asking, what does this area offer for tourism? What can we do here? And it goes on in involvement, development, consolidation, stagnation. As more tourism comes, you reach this critical point where you're at the carrying capacity socially and environmentally, and you got to make important management decisions about how to mitigate the impacts of tourism. And that can either lead to a decline or further stagnation or even a rejuvenation of tourism. And then local attitudes typically get more negative as tourism develops. So here they go from euphoric when you think about tourism coming to an area out to antagonism. Locals just kind of hate feeling overrun by tourists. But ecological restoration can link tourism between core protected areas, think like a national park, or a peripheral conservation area, a place that's being restored, perhaps, that's been agricultural landscape, perhaps. And so we developed this model, myself and my advisor a couple of years ago, doing research in Montana, where a nonprofit called American Prairie Reserve they're still buying ranches, cattle ranches. They're trying to build a massive protected area on the Great Plains. And so that is ecologically connected to a place like Glacier National Park, but also can be connected through tourism, having tourism experiences and infrastructure put in place. So that helps set the stage, I hope, for this current study here, looking at the Sky Island borderlands. In this region, Cuenca Los Ojos, the nonprofit, is also buying cattle ranches, and they've been restoring landscapes, revegetating landscapes, reintroducing wildlife. They've been just working miracles on the land and restoring the flow of water, the water table through their work. And they're highlighted in this light blue color here. So this is a biodiversity hotspot, the junction of the Sonoran Desert with the Chihuahuan Desert. The Rocky Mountains meets the Sierra Madre Mountains and the Great Plains all converging here. So you could find pronghorn here, you could find bison or jaguar, all these different neotropical Great Plains, Rocky Mountain species, all right here. So you have very unique natural and cultural resources. You have U.S. and Mexico. This is the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham, of the Apache peoples, of the Opata, Pascua Yaqui. So many cultures here. From a tourism standpoint, I would say this area is undervisited. It's nothing like a Grand Canyon or a Yellowstone. It's certainly just not nearly as popular as those places, especially in Mexico. But there's a lot of protected areas that are highlighted here that are important tourist attractions in this area, and of course important for conservation in a landscape connectivity lens. To collect data, I interviewed and conducted focus groups with local stakeholders. This included conservation nonprofits, state and federal agencies, tourism businesses, and then even the tourists themselves, local residents, and ranchers and landowners. And so they were the ones who shared their pictures and shared their insights with me about their insights towards tourism and ecological restoration. So overall, there were 67 people who participated in the study. Some of them were interviewed multiple times and then conducted a couple focus groups where some of these participants were also part of these focus groups. And what I found here is that there are abundant challenges and opportunities. If you're interested, my whole dissertation takes a much more conceptual view. I'd be happy to share that with anyone who's interested. In this study, it's kind of looking at the practical side of things, but there's abundant challenges and opportunities for both tourism and restoration. And there's very favorable attitudes amongst the locals here. This is a quote from a Park Service employee saying, "We have both desert and mountains here. We have heat and cold. We have such a variety of experiences that are available, that are unique, that you won't find anywhere else." And I like that quote. Really sums up, how unique this place is. And below here's a picture of Saguaro National Park with a fresh layer of snow, seeing that contrast of the Saguaro Desert in snow just captures the beauty of this region. Now, going into some of these opportunities, especially for tourism, a lot of things are already established. Birding, hiking, there's so many rare species like this violet-crested hummingbird you see in the upper right. Cycling, through hiking like the Arizona Trail, many historic sites, cultural events, the San Javier del Bac Mission, the annual powwow. Some people talked about loving to visit that, or other cultural events, visiting one of the national park sites. So at the bottom right, you have the Tumacacri National Historic Park. That's a historic site. It hosts cultural events, and it's part of the Park Service, all wrapped up in one attraction. Opportunities. So many opportunities are still needing development, or both from a tourism and a restoration perspective, and especially in Mexico. There are protected areas such as the Ajos Bavispe, the Área Protegida Ajos Bavispe, a beautiful site. Tourism is almost non-existent. There's festivals like the Festival Luna de Montaña in the town of Huachinera in Sonora, and they would love to have more visitors, but again, people are very concerned, afraid to visit. There was that unfortunate killing of a family, mothers and their children, not too far from the site, so that certainly puts a negative image in people's minds of this area. And then there's the private protected areas. They're called ADVCs in the Spanish acronym. There's areas designated for voluntary conservation, and that would include Cuenca Los Ojos, you see here in this highlighted in green. From a restoration standpoint, a huge opportunity is to reconnect and restore jaguar habitat. You can see also in this map of these two prongs of jaguar corridors, one through like the Babaquivari, Patagonia, Huachuca Mountains, to the other prong coming up from the Sierra Madre to the Piloncillo and the Animas Mountains in New Mexico and Arizona. Now, here's some of the focus group responses. I feel like I'm going a little fast, but I'd love to answer any questions at the end. But people really highlighted how you have the culture also that can complement any kind of tourism here. Because you can't quite guarantee that you're going to see some wildlife, but you can have people tour this rural landscape, see the culture. And then for restoration, participants were identifying specific sites and specific species like beaver, bison, trout. These are big opportunities for more restoration work. In terms of challenges, one of the major challenges is this difficulty of access. And this is amplified on the Mexico side, just that lack of infrastructure. This picture here shows a rugged road in the Sonoran Sky Islands. So it's hard to imagine a family in a minivan driving on a road like this to go visit the area. Probably the biggest issue, there's a lack of public land in Mexico, making access difficult. There's a lack of familiarity and information. So people, they really just don't know about many of these places. And they just have this, again, looming negative image from their own experience listening to the media and such. And so there's also that perception of safety. People are afraid. They don't see this as a very safe place to visit. And above here, this is a quote from a local resident. We were talking about Ajos Bavispe and Cuenca Los Ojos. This person says, well, I haven't heard of these places. Like, you don't hear about these, which is why I haven't visited them yet. And I'm translating from Spanish here, some of these quotes. And so that shows one of the challenges for bringing more people and having them become invested in protecting these areas as well. Continued challenges. Many people shared pictures of the border wall and talked about that whole challenge for both tourism and restoration. You're severing corridors and connectivity. Here's someone taking a picture of someone taking a picture of the wall. And you can see the construction equipment through the steel bollards. This is at Cuenca Los Ojos. Another challenge is the difficulty for Mexican nationals to get a U.S. visa. And then the border's been closed for much of the last 2 years. So that, of course, hurt tourism. And then also, actual safety concerns. This is another challenge. And then the fragmentation of these corridors and of wild spaces. Oh, I want to go back. So here's a quote from someone that was born and raised in the area and is now an expert, does research on the borderlands. And they're saying, it breaks my heart not being able to visit places that you have visited your whole life for the question of security. For example, the case of Magdalena. My family would always visit the church there, and now you can't anymore. It's a sad thing for everyone. And I believe we had a presentation about pilgrimages to Magdalena in this conference. But again, many people just do not feel safe to go there right now to see that important church, to see this town because of criminal activities lately. Here are some focus group responses talking about these challenges or barriers. For both tourism and restoration, the border wall is really front and center. Also, lack of familiarity is hurting tourism, or a lack of funding is impeding more restoration and landscape conservation work. Now, going into the linkages between tourism and restoration, here's some specific examples. Lonnie was telling me about her work with the Sky Island Alliance, and I know they'll take groups of volunteers to remove invasive species in Aravaipa Canyon in Graham County. And so that's a form of restoration. Or the Wings Over Wilcox event to see the wintering site for tens of thousands of sandhill cranes. This whole site only remains wetlands because of concerted efforts by concerned locals to pump water there so that the sandhill cranes can continue to use this as a wintering site. And that has important festivals and important economic impacts that my advisor has actually done economic impact study on this event. And then agritourism, sustainable crops like agave. This can be, you can make an income off of producing agave. This is also important habitat for bats. And you can take people there on tours, as this picture is showing. Now, there's more linkages, include citizen science or volunteer conservation work that tourists could certainly be a part of, or seeing that the actual fruits of restoration, like bison at Rancho Aluno in Chihuahua, that's now managed by Cuenca Los Ojos, Not a lot of tourism at the moment, but feasibly there could be. Or volunteer ecological restoration work. This group of young people in Sonora stacking rocks. This is part of the whole process of slowing down the flow of rainwater and restoring nutrients to the soil. Again, some of you are probably conservationists by trade. You could elaborate more, but this is something that tourists could definitely do. And then here's a quote from a tourism business owner in Arizona talking about restored wildlife. They're saying, birders go to the Grand Canyon to see the Grand Canyon, but guess what? That's secondary. Seeing the Grand Canyon is secondary to seeing a free-soaring condor because they've been reintroduced. So don't you think that if jaguars are reintroduced, that people would hope to see one? So I for one, have seen a condor at Navajo Bridge. Very cool sight. And then there has been talk by some scientists about restoring jaguars to the vicinity, to the region, a little bit more north of the Sky Islands. And so I know some of you might be thinking, well, Connor, don't go promoting jaguar safaris out here in the Sky Islands. It's too arid. You would probably never see one. But we talked about the allure of just knowing that they're there. That certainly adds to the allure of visiting a place. Now, here's some important implications for tourism and conservation or restoration planning. The multi-scalar cross-border partnerships are vital to driving more tourism and more collaboration and restoration. Tourism organizations like Visit Tucson or Visit Sonora, the partnerships between these groups is so important. Partnerships between nonprofits on either side of the border, like Borderlands Restoration Network and Cuenca Los Ojos, or between governments, that's still lacking, more intergovernmental collaboration. And then local stakeholders can help bring more awareness to decrease fear and anxiety, more printed, more online information about what this area has to offer. And some of the local imagery of the natural cultural assets can help rewrite the narrative of this place, so people don't have as much of a negative outlook. Here's a picture of a vendor selling the image of a jaguar or elegant trogon on these earrings. And so this kind of imagery can help rebrand this area. Also, some more practical implications. Nonprofits and these voluntary conservation areas can continue to provide volunteer opportunities for visitors, or even cater to some niche groups of tourists like birders and wildlife enthusiasts, bikers and hikers. But this should not also come at the cost of not including local stakeholders, like that person in Agua Prieta who's never heard of some of these places. School field trips or other kind of family outings should be encouraged for locals so they can see, the local gems that are in their region. Now, just to wrap up, where there's a will, there's a way. So there's a lot of inspiring partnerships going on right now, and the continued efforts of these partnerships, their advocacy, can help reconnect people and the landscape. I see tourism as an important way to reconnect people, being able to cross borders, being able to visit and experience cultures, connect with people. That's important. Or being able to see these cross-border conservation works team up and being able to help restore and reconnect places. And as more information is brought to light here, that can lead to a decrease in fear and anxiety that some people have about this region. So with that, I'll leave you with these images that other participants shared with me. This is an elf owl eating a millipede. And one of the few people to ever see an ocelot in Arizona shared this picture with me. So I'll leave you with these images. Thank you so much for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Go ahead. Oh, I can, or you can, yeah. He's going to hear the owl, so.
So my question is, I heard you say that you're going to give a lot of people in the Sky Island region, but I wondered if you also interviewed, or if you knew of any studies interviewing people in other parts of the United States and asking them about their perceptions of the borderlands on both sides of the border.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. And there's a little bit of an echo. So I think, did you ask talking to people outside of the region in the United States?
About their perceptions of the borderlands on both sides of the border, the U.S. side as well as the Mexican side.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I think that in itself would be very important, especially when in trying to discuss like people's perceptions of this area. Because the farther away you get from the border, the less people are going to know about what's really going on, right? So many people either lived in the area or they had some kind of connection to it, working or grew up there. So some people may actually be currently residing in Phoenix or in Hermosillo and Sonora. So certainly got some perspectives of people, not right currently living on the border. But I think that'd be a wonderful study, future study that could really contribute to learning more about this whole perception of the area. And so that's something I think would be really interesting for future research. And that's a great point that you make there.
Connor, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Years back, we convened a group around geotourism as the topic of convening. And, AOT was there, Quico Los Ojos was there. A lot of these groups were there. And I think one of the things we identified as a platform that would be valuable to explore connecting with more intentionally was Arizona Mexico Commission. So because I know they've done some things like safety corridors, right, that are binational as far as connecting Phoenix to Rocky Point. So there's evidence of sort of large, high-level government collaboration, and it seems like many of the things we're talking about of weaving the thread between protected sites on the U.S. side and protected sites on the Mexico side could benefit from that high-level government engagement. So I didn't know if there had been any progress on that or if you've seen movement at AMC.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And so this project is actually still going on. And we do have a workshop in Bisbee on April 1st from 9:30 to 12:30. You feel free to show up, any of you. And local stakeholders can comment on the sustainable tourism plan. So that's really the core project that is being supported here by the Southwest Border Resource Protection Program. So we do have lots of these different tourism groups, AOT or Arizona Mexico Commission, that will be participating in this workshop. So we see that as very important for engaging the public. And I also just want to make another comment on that first question. While people outside the area were not focused on it with this research, it's really important to get these local insights. People in Agua Prieta would just say how, tourists don't come anymore. They used to come and they'd buy whatever. And now it's like people see the dentist and that's it. So getting this on the ground perspective is certainly very enlightening to learn about perceptions and how things have changed. Just want to throw out that comment as well. Thank you for these questions.
Other questions? Right. That's a sign of somebody who covered all their bases. Too many questions.
That's good. That's good. Well, yeah, thank you all so much.